and airing back after.
The screensaver is on. The video is recording.
Monday through Friday. Music from the Sherman Brothers Band with the score of Mary Poppins. This is the section called Fleet Birds, featuring pianist Lawson.
So there could be drug-drug interactions that need to be really monitored closely.
Add to that the need for human testing with a significant number of, well, older subjects. That takes money and time, two things many seniors don't have. I'm Karen Michelle for Marketplace.
So more than 36 states for medical use, as distinct from the 24, including D.C. now, that have legalized cannabis products for recreational purposes. I'm David Brancaccio, Marketplace Morning Report. 8 p.m., American Public Media.
It's a minute before 8 o'clock. This is 91.7 WVXU and 88.5 WMUV. Mostly sunny, a high of 78 today. Support for WVXU comes from Broadway in Cincinnati. Subscription packages are on sale now for the upcoming 23-24 season, featuring MJ the Musical, Mrs. Doubtfire, Beetlejuice, Peter Pan, Six, and more. Packages and more information available at BroadwayInCincinnati.com.
Support comes from the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine and UC Physicians, where the UC Emergency Medicine team is standing at the ready for minor injuries and the most complex trauma to recognized research and breakthrough treatments. Their mission is to be ready for you when you need them most. Learn more at med.uc.edu/indispensable.
91.7 WVXU Cincinnati and 88.5 WMUV Oxford. News from Cincinnati Public Radio and NPR.
Good morning. The Supreme Court keeps the Indian Child Welfare Act intact, and that means Native kids who are adopted or in foster care will likely stay with their Native communities. It's Morning Edition from NPR News. Social media site Reddit is taking heat from users because they can't access some of their most popular communities. I'm Layla Falden.
Enemy Martinez, Steve Inskeep questions Reddit's CEO about why things have changed. Plus, there are new members of the Songwriters Hall of Fame, and as the week closes in on Father's Day, a pair of brothers remember their dad. It's Friday, June 16th. Today in 1975, the Milwaukee Bucks traded center Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to the Los Angeles Lakers. News is next.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Texas officials say 3 people have been killed by a tornado that crashed through the Texas Panhandle yesterday. Rescue officials in the town of Perryton, north of Amarillo, say about 75 people were injured. Damage is substantial. The tornado made a direct hit on one mobile home park. Hundreds of wildfires continue to burn across Canada, sending smoke and haze to parts of the U.S. NPR's Nathan Rott reports many are burning in remote areas.
Thousands of people here in Quebec are still unable to return home because of these wildfires. Local fire officials say smoke, limited road access, and aggressive fire behavior is making it difficult to know when some communities will be able to open back up. Scattered rains earlier this week helped slow some of the fires, but forecasts show another wave of unusually hot temperatures coming for eastern Canada next week, which could be a cause for concern. Staffing remains an issue, with Canadian firefighting resources spread thin across the country. More than 100 U.S. firefighters have been deployed here in Quebec alone to assist in the effort. Nathan Rott, NPR News, Val-d'Or, Quebec.
The National Weather Service has issued air quality alerts today for parts of Iowa. It's because of smoke from the Canadian wildfires. Forecasters say the haze and smoke should gradually dissipate by tonight. People who are sensitive to air quality are being asked to limit their outdoor activities. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass is excoriating Texas officials who sent a busload of migrants to the city this week. More than 40 people, including children, were left at an LA transit hub. Immigration activists have alleged the people on the bus did not have access to provisions or water on their trip. Texas Governor Greg Abbott rejected that accusation.
I'll be very clear. They had abundant water and food supplies throughout the entire trip.
Abbott says Texas is the front line for the border crisis. He is blaming that on the Biden administration. Microsoft founder Bill Gates met with Chinese President Xi Jinping today. Gates is in China this week. NPR's Emily Fang reports he says the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation will donate $50 million to fight disease in China.
Xi used the meeting to promote his vaguely defined Global Security Initiative, a conflict resolution framework Xi laid out last year. Calling Gates his, quote, old friend, Xi said China would, quote, never follow the old path of a strong country seeking hegemony. Gates is the latest in a string of business executives who have visited China this year after the country lifted COVID controls and eliminated quarantines. Tesla and Twitter CEO Elon Musk also met with Xi earlier this year. Musk is seeking to expand a huge Tesla factory in Shanghai. Emily Fang, NPR News, Taipei.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Paramount Network, presenting 1883, a Yellowstone origin story, a summer-long event. 1883, full series network premiere, starting Sunday at 8 on Paramount Network.
Good morning, it's 8:04 and 60 degrees in Cincinnati, 55 in Dayton. This is 91.7 WVXU. I'm Tana Weingartner in for Marianne Zalesnik. 3 children are dead after allegedly being shot by their father yesterday in Claremont County. Police were called to a home in Monroe Township after reports of the shooting. The children, ages 3, 4, and 7, were pronounced dead at the scene. Their mother was treated for a gunshot wound to her hand, according to the county sheriff. 32-year-old Chad Doraman was taken into custody and is charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder, according to our news partner WCPO. An investigation is ongoing. New Richmond schools say grief counselors will be on hand today starting at 9 o'clock. The Ohio Senate passed its $94 billion 2-year state budget, with all Republicans supporting it and all Democrats opposed. State House correspondent Joe Ingles has details.
Senate President Matt Huffman says the budget, which includes tax cuts and a near universal school voucher plan, is responsible and transformational.
This is a solid conservative budget.
But it also contains controversial Senate bills not passed in the House that would make changes in education, from kindergarten to college that Republicans want. Democratic Senator Bill DeMora says it's obvious why they're in the budget.
Is because these bills were not making any progress in the other chamber?
It's likely the House will reject these changes, so the budget will end up in a conference committee. It's supposed to be signed by June 30th. Joe Ingles at the Ohio Public Radio State House News Bureau.
Kentucky will soon start getting payouts from a group of settlements with businesses it sued for playing a role in the opioid crisis. This time the money will come from Walgreens and CVS, as well as the pharmaceutical companies Teva and Allergan. WFPL's Morgan Watson explains.
Attorney General Daniel Cameron says the Bluegrass State will get more than $317 million over 15 years. That money should start rolling in by the end of 2023.
This comes on top of the several $100 million Kentucky has secured through other opioid-related lawsuits. The Kentucky Supreme Court issued a pair of rulings yesterday related to two former state prosecutors who were subject to impeachment charges. Derek Opperly with member station WKMS has the story.
Impeachment proceedings for former Commonwealth's attorneys Ronnie Goldie and Rick Bowling were announced in January. Bowling, who represented Christian County, reportedly falsified testimony that led to an indictment and wrote a letter to former Governor Matt Bevin asking him to pardon a sex offender, claiming without any proof that his conviction was a vendetta against the offender's grandparents, who had reportedly donated to Bowling's campaign. He resigned to avoid impeachment in February, and the Supreme Court ruled this week to suspend him from practicing law for 5 years. Goldie represented 4 northeastern Kentucky counties. He was impeached in March over trading favors with a defendant for nude photos. Though Goldie can no longer hold elected office in Kentucky, the court this week lifted the temporary suspension of his ability to practice law. I'm Derek Operly in Murray.
WVXU goes wherever you do. Listen to 91.7 online at iHeartRadio.com and on your mobile device through the iHeartRadio app.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Layla Fulton in Washington, D.C.
Enemy Martinez in Culver City, California. Protests against the new fee structure at social media site Reddit have meant that large parts of its content went dark this week. It's a big deal for some of the 57 million people who use the discussion site daily, and it also reflects some larger shifts in social media. So CEO Steve Huffman talked with our own Steve Inskeep for his first broadcast interview since the protest began.
Reddit users keep threads of conversation going on thousands of topics, from politics to pop culture to porn. Many people use it through apps on their phones, and some of those so-called third-party apps say they will shut down now that Reddit wants to bill them millions of dollars to use its content. That's why operators of almost 9,000 communities on Reddit protested this week by having their conversations go dark. When CEO Steve Huffman came on the line, he insisted the protest only affected a small part of the business.
So Reddit is about 100,000 communities, right? And these communities cover every kind of topic imaginable. There was some disruption, but mostly on our back end because the shape of Reddit changed. But in terms of the business, there's plenty of content. Most of our users got to enjoy that content. You know, that's really what Reddit is all about.
I want to make sure of what you're saying here. If someone is protesting or boycotting your business, they want to cost you money, which would influence you. I think I hear you asserting that you have not really been cost a lot of money or a lot of trouble here. Is that right?
It has not cost a lot of money. It's been a fair amount of trouble in the sense that this is what we're working on this week, but from a business point of view, not particularly disruptive.
So did the protesters persuade you to change anything at all about your strategy?
No, we've had protests like this before. So for some context, Reddit is a platform powered by people. The communities are made by people. It's a democratic platform. And so this is not the first protest that we've seen. However, in this case, we've been subsidizing other businesses for free for a long time. We're stopping that. That is not a negotiable point. We're simply in an unsustainable position, and so we need to get into a sustainable situation. And so that's the core of this change.
I have so many things to follow up on, and this is one of them. Bobby Allen, our tech correspondent, spoke with the founder of Apollo, which is one of the third-party apps that has been using Reddit and has built its business on Reddit. Christian Seelig is his name. And he has a question not just about what you're doing, but how you're doing it. Why, he asks, did Reddit decide on just a 30-day period for this transition, which gives them, in his view, virtually no opportunity to adjust their business model to the way you're adjusting yours?
So we actually started talking about these changes, including with Christian and the other third-party apps, back in April. They all knew this was coming. What they didn't know was the price. Now, the two largest apps, Apollo and another one called Reddit is Fun, have just decided they don't want to participate going forward. So they're shutting down at the end of this month. The other third-party apps we are in conversations with, and there are areas of opportunity to be more flexible, to give longer transition times, to go a little deeper. For folks who want to have productive conversations with us, we're here, we're having those conversations.
I'm in Oxford this morning. It's 8:14, 56 degrees. Just picked up McDonald's. I'm out here because I mistakenly volunteered to host or lead National Fudge Day as part of an employee appreciation thing. And it's a lot of work, so I'm out here. I'm gonna do some personal errands and then
the screensaver is on. Video is recording.
I'm gonna decorate the Oxford substation for Fudge Day. And then go back to the main office. So we're on Locust Street. We're passing by Kramer Elementary. It's a new building. Now we're on Sycamore Street, and I'm going to the Oxford Post Office. Get back on Sycamore. on Miami. We're on Miami University property. We're at the north end of the campus. We got more dormitories on the left. Fraternities on the right. Students are still off, so it's not busy. We got the business school on the left. Probably the nicest building here. Inside it's all granite all over the place.
Deal with that question, which leaves the door open for new challenges.
I have no doubt that the plaintiff's lawyers are actively looking for their next case.
To overturn ICWA and Indian law more broadly. But
this has become a more difficult business proposition for the plaintiffs.
he says a multinational law firm that represents lots of commercial gaming and oil and gas clients argued this case pro bono, meaning it sunk millions into the case that it won't get back. after this loss in the Supreme Court. He says the question is, who will be willing
The screensaver is on. Video is recording.
I'm Savannah Marr for Marketplace.
News, including financial news, they don't want you to know tends to get buried on Friday afternoons. My colleague Kai Risdal and team will unbury it later today on many public radio stations or streaming from marketplace.org. Our executive producer is Kelly Silvera, engineers Ryan Allison, Jessica Tuller, and Nick Esposito. This is the Marketplace Morning Report from APM, American Public Media.
It's a minute before 9 o'clock. The BBC World Service News Hour is coming your way right here on WVXU and WMUB.
Support comes from Dogtown, a local doggy daycare and boarding business with multiple locations. There for you 24/7, 365 days, where dogs sleep and cuddle with a person and other friendly dogs at night. With live webcams, you can check in on your beloved pets from anywhere in the world. Information at dogtowncincinnati.com.
Support comes from Music and Event Management, Inc., presenting Young the Giant with special guests Milky Chance at the Andrew J. Brady Music Center on June 20th. The multi-platinum fan favorites return to Cincinnati at their 2023 summer tour. Tickets are available now at Ticketmaster.com. Young the Giant with Milky Chance live in Cincinnati on June 20th.
91.7 WVXU Cincinnati and 88.5 WMUB Oxford. News from Cincinnati Public Radio and NPR.
Welcome to News Hour. It's live from the BBC World Service in London. I'm Tim Franks. Today, the cost of war. A BBC investigation into Russian casualties in Ukraine finds numbers far in excess of official tallies.
A man called and told me that my son died fighting in Ukraine. I was shocked. I asked, how come my son is even at the war?
How much more can the country endure? Also, the hundreds feared lost at sea in the Mediterranean, migrant boats sinking.
My brother has left some time ago, and we're waiting for him. He's not at the hospital, nor in the port. We're anxious. We just need them to tell us if they are alive, dead, or in the sea.
We'll hear from the Red Cross official leading efforts to reunite families and ask whether the Greek authorities failed in their duties. And a new type of dinosaur bears its bones. First, the news.
I'm Debbie Russ with the BBC News. Hello. The United Nations has called for urgent action to prevent more migrants drowning at sea. 78 people are known to have died when an overloaded boat sank off the coast of Greece this week, but between 200 and 600 are still thought to be missing. The Greek Coast Guard insists it tried to help the stricken boat, but critics say they waited too long. Nick Beak reports.
Accounts from at least 2 survivors have claimed their boat overturned after the Greek Coast Guard tried to tow it. But a government spokesman has denied this was the cause of the sinking. He did confirm a rope was attached to the migrant vessel so that officials could get nearer to offer help. He said that assistance was refused. However, this statement contradicts the official line of the past 48 hours, that the Coast Guard had discreetly observed the boat from a distance and found it to be on a steady course and speed.
The Ukrainian military says Kiev has come under missile attack as a delegation of African leaders visits the country to promote dialogue with Russia. The Ukrainian foreign minister said the message was clear. Russia wanted war, not peace. The African delegation is led by the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Marty Jones reports from Kiev.
The Ukrainians will be hoping that today's missile strike will help bolster their case to the visiting African leaders that Russia is the aggressor. Many African countries have chosen to remain neutral, not wanting to choose sides in this conflict. The African delegation says its continent has been disproportionately affected by the war. Many African countries import cereals from Ukraine and fertilizers from Russia, but their supply has been severely reduced by the conflict, causing food prices to skyrocket. The Reuters news agency says it's seen the delegation's draft proposal. It includes that Russian troops pull back and that the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant against President Putin be removed.
Marty Jones reporting. Human rights groups in the Sudanese region of West Darfur are reporting further ethnic-based killings by Arab militias and the paramilitary rapid support forces. The US State Department say there is credible evidence that the RSF has destroyed entire villages and carried out rapes and murders, while Africa editor Will Ross reports.
People fleeing from Sudan into Chad say they've suffered appalling atrocities when attacked by the Rapid Support Forces and Arab militias. At checkpoints on the way to the border, gunmen are extorting money, and human rights activists say there's been widespread sexual violence and killings based on ethnicity. Satellite images show that parts of El Geneina city and entire villages in Darfur have been razed to the ground. The US State Department says there's a pattern of targeted ethnic violence against non-Arab populations. In many ways, the violence is a continuation of what happened in Darfur 20 years ago. It's being widely condemned, but no one seems to have any idea how to stop it.
This is the latest world news from the BBC. Good morning, it's 9:04 and 60 degrees in Cincinnati, 55 in Dayton. This is 91.7 WVXU. I'm Tana Weingartner. A staffing shortage at Kentucky's first female-only youth detention center is forcing the state to transfer kids from a couple of facilities in temporary moves. Governor Andy Beshear made the announcement yesterday. He says juveniles at the female-only Campbell Regional Juvenile Detention Center in Newport are being relocated to the detention center in Boyd County, about 135 miles away. In a corresponding move, male youth at the Boyd Regional Juvenile Detention Center are being transferred to another facility in Breathitt County, about 100 miles away. Breathitt said that's done to keep the male and female juveniles separated. Indiana University is helping to track electric and gas utility disconnections across the country. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Rebecca Thiel reports researchers with the IU's Energy Justice Lab hope it will raise awareness about energy insecurity and encourage policies that protect vulnerable users.
IU professor David Kaniski says the state could do more to protect vulnerable residents with unpaid bills from shutoffs. For example, Indiana's winter moratorium on disconnections only protects Hoosiers eligible for federal assistance, and there's no moratorium for the summer.
It's not unheard of for people to die of heat exhaustion because they've lost access to energy, right? As we are increasingly living in a world of climate change, it's imperative that more states put in place policies that are protective in the summer, as well as the protections that already exist for winter months.
According to the dashboard, AES Indiana had the highest disconnection rate among electric utilities in 2021, but some of the data should be taken with a grain of salt. The Citizens Action Coalition says Indiana doesn't require utilities to report things like disconnections and unpaid bills, and we won't get a full picture of the problem until it does. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
Mostly sunny today, a high of 78. This is 91.7.
Hello, welcome to NewsHour. It's live from the BBC World Service studios in central London. I'm Tim Franks. We've got a programme confronting two big questions today. In 30 minutes we'll try to work out how it came to be that a boat that had been spotted by the Greek Coast Guard, clearly and dangerously overloaded with migrants, sank with the loss, almost certainly, of hundreds of lives. We're starting with another question. In Ukraine, we're always attempting to see how the war is progressing, but today we're beginning with a much more specific query. What can we say with certainty about casualties, in this case, on the Russian side? No warring party likes to advertise their losses, but my colleague Olga Ivshina from the BBC's Russian service has been investigating and joins me in the NewsHour studio. Olga, we'll hear your report in a moment, but first of all, give me a sense of how you went about trying to gather the information.
So since the start of the invasion, together with the independent Russian website Media Zone and a brave team of volunteers, we just started putting together a list of all confirmed casualties. We used official reports. First it was statements by regional heads, now it's statements by head of villages, head of schools, directors of local libraries, but still, they are officials. Also, media reports from federal TV channels to tiny printed local newspapers, because they print quite a lot. Also military memorials at schools and towns, and cemeteries, information from cemeteries. So all together, this helped us to put these 25,000 names, which is 4 times more than Russia has acknowledged.
Sarıkov Igor Igorевич, Бурталов Халид Шамсудинович, Алексеенко Аксененко Максим Анатольевич, Мышляев Владимир Егорович.
As mobile phone video pans shakily across rows of freshly dug graves, a voice slowly reads out the names of the dead.
Дорофеев Николай Григорьевич, Russak Alexei Nikolaevich.
Clips like this, filed by volunteers inside Russia, plus social media posts and local news reports, is how I discovered that there are at least 7 special cemeteries spread across 4,000 kilometers of territory in occupied Ukraine and Russia, from Luhansk to Siberia. They are the last resting place of poorly trained fighters. Many were prisoners recruited by the notorious Butler mercenary group and have been growing rapidly in recent months. Satellite imagery obtained by the BBC shows that one location has 20 times as many graves as it did 6 months ago. I stumbled across these cemeteries because since the start of the war, I have been working with the independent Russian website Mediazona, verifying the deaths of Russian soldiers using social media, local news reports, and volunteers inside the country. So far, we have identified the names of more than 25,000 fighters. That's 4 times the number Russia has acknowledged. To find out more, I set out to speak to the families of soldiers who had been killed fighting in Ukraine. It's illegal to report anything but the official death toll inside Russia, so I've come to Kyrgyzstan. Hundreds of people from countries like this that were once part of the Soviet Union have signed up to join Putin's forces.
Заходите. Да? Нет, мы вперед, она нет, или я вперед?
Да, что у вас?
Да, спасибо.
Assalamu alaikum. In a house in a small town called Jalalabad, Kajibek plays me a TikTok video of his nephew, Sirgatbek, taken when he was on his way to fight. The 21-year-old is typical of those who died at the start of the conflict. A young, highly trained professional soldier in the Russian army.
He always wanted to be the first. I think that's why he decided to join the military. And there he was also given a choice apparently. He chose to be there.
Go to war, you mean?
Yes, yes.
As a professional soldier, he was buried with full military honors after he was killed in action in May 2022. But 6 months later, in a nearby village, there was no military funeral for Ayan, even though he also died fighting for Russia. His mother tells me that's because he wasn't a professional soldier, but a prisoner serving a 7-year sentence for assault. He had signed up to fight for the mercenary group Wagner, hoping to win his freedom in return for 6 months on the front line.
A man called and told me that my son died fighting in Ukraine. I was shocked. I asked, how come my son is even at the war? Did my son die for nothing? Am I going to cry until the end of my life?
The deaths of Sirgatbek and Ayan show how Russia's war has changed. In the first 3 months of the conflict, it lost large numbers of professional soldiers like Sirgatbek. But in the past 3 months, it's non-professional fighters like Ayan that are dying in greater numbers. The number of dead on our list is far higher than the one the Russian government has acknowledged. However, even our figures are not complete. We can only use the information that we find online and are sent to us by volunteers. According to our estimates, the real number could be more than twice as high. And each time I check my phone, there are new messages and alerts with the names and photos of more Russian fighters killed on the front line.
Olga Ivshina with that report, and Olga's still with me in the NewsHour studio. Olga, as the numbers grow, and I mean, you pointed out a lot of this is you're gathering from official Russian information sources. Is there any sign that this is an increasing challenge to the Russian authorities in terms of just public relations?
Yes and no. The recent poll shows that 20% of Russian population personally knows someone who was killed during that war. On the other hand, the propaganda is working, so many people are still brainwashed that these people died, as they think, fighting the West for the freedom of Russia, the message, which is really strange, but because of informational isolation, it seems to get through.
Right, so in other words, although the numbers may be growing, the broader picture of the Russians controlling the narrative, that stays the same.
Yes.
Olga Ivshina from the BBC's Russian service, thank you very much for joining us. And there's more, if you want, from Olga's investigations into Russian casualty numbers on our website, bbc.com/news. Well, what about the types of Russian fighter who are dying? Olga mentioned some of what she had discovered in her report. But also, what about the mystery over Ukrainian casualty numbers? Professor Phillips O'Brien is a military analyst and head of the School of International Relations at the University of St Andrews in Scotland. Let's begin then with the questions over the type of Russian fighter who is dying. What's he learning?
I mean, it's very hard to exactly say who's dying, but it does seem to be that Putin is partly insulating himself from direct political pressure on the cities by mostly sending in soldiers from the provinces, away from Moscow, away from St. Petersburg, and the like, or indeed, in the case of Wagner, in some cases, prisoners. So that does seem to have been a deliberate choice to have the greatest conscription not to be from the main Russian cities. Certainly in the case of Wagner, a lot of the early recruits were from the prisons. They seem to have basically almost tapped the prisons dry, and for a while that could provide some political cover.
But I suppose then, if you're saying that, in terms of, for example, mercenaries recruited from prisons, that well is running dry, you wonder how long this can be sustained for.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, prisoners, they would have gotten the most motivated and able prisoners to begin with. Each time you go back to that same well, it's going to get smaller and parcher. That's not a long-term winning strategy for the Russians. But the way the Russians have been fighting the war has been very short-term. They sort of accumulate force and throw it in. They haven't been setting up the long-term training centers, the long-term sort of preparatory agencies one would think to fight a long war. So it might be that they're just trying to get through each individual phase and do what they have to do. We can certainly tell that they are in serious soldier problem again if they do something that they did last fall, when they did that mass conscription, which was terribly chaotic. If they end up having to do that again, then you can say that they are really in serious trouble.
The Ukrainians equally do not advertise their casualty numbers. Have you got a sense, again, of the sorts of losses that Ukraine is enduring on the battlefield?
I mean, the Ukrainians have been very careful about letting the losses out. And interestingly, perhaps not surprisingly, Western intelligence agencies have not made estimates about that, whereas they have made estimates about the Russian losses. So, say for instance, the United States has made an estimate, I think the one they came out with is over the last 6 months, the Russians have lost over 100,000 in different kind of casualties. One assumes that Ukrainian casualties are considerably below that, say over the last 6 months, because they would have been fighting on the defensive. And as you say, being on the defensive in this war, as indeed in many wars, provides certain advantages. And we're seeing that now with the Ukrainians trying to go forward. The side on the defensive can dig in, they can entrench, defensive firepower is very powerful, and the side on the offensive has to expose itself to go forward. From that point of view, by the way,
now we're on Ross Avenue. It's running parallel to Main Street on our left, but this kind of avoids all the stop and go traffic on Main Street. And this area is known as Rossville. Nice homes here, wealthy people, politicians. back on B Street. Heading back to headquarters. It's Friday. Remember, it's Friday. See you, Christine. You too.
Screensaver is on. Video is recording.
the train coming. Catching the train. Yeah. Did you see that? Could have had an accident right there. It's American feeding time. 5 o'clock. People getting nuts. get on the Columbia Bridge. Basically going the opposite way of my morning commute. Taking the same roads. Hopefully this was a smart decision. At least I thought so. I was trying to avoid all the Main Street traffic. Get on Park Avenue. I'm trying to get to the west side. Drop off stuff at Goodwill. People, green is good. Let's get through these lights. Park Avenue. Avenue. Going home traffic, I guess. It's a popular route, I guess. I guess that's true. A lot of people use this route to cut through Hamilton to get to Oxford. Come on. guess.
Screensaver is on. Video is recording.
Faster, let's go by. Just hang out at home, save money.